Hey everyone, welcome back. Recently, I've posted a video chronicling the history of William Afton, the main villain of Five Nights at Freddy's. In it, I analyzed his character and all of the major events he was involved in. To create the video, I played through all 7 of the original games, reread the first novel of the book trilogy, and watched the first Five Nights at Freddy's movie. After looking through all this FNAF media, I started to realize a common through line, something that almost all of the main characters in the original games shared. After realizing this, I knew I had to capitalize on it. So in this video, I want to take a look at different characters in the series and talk about what I believe to be the deeper meaning of Five Nights at Freddy's. Almost every piece of art has some sort of deeper meaning behind it, sometimes multiple. For example, one of the deeper meanings of God of War Ragnarok is how grief and love are always intertwined and how it can make one feel horrible, but also help create beautiful things in the future. Or as another example, one of the deeper meanings behind something like Alan Wake is on the blurry line between fiction and reality, and how fiction can influence reality in small and massive ways that affect how we live our lives. I believe FNAF has a deep meaning similar to these other games, but to explain why is a bit more tricky. Like I said in the last video, FNAF is not a linear or easy to understand story, with most of the timeline being held up by fan speculation and headcanons. So your interpretation of what the meaning behind this story is can be completely different from mine, and that's okay. I'd love to hear about how you perceive the story. Please comment it below. I love sparking civil discussion about things like this. And while you're here, make sure to like and subscribe as it supports me in making future content on FNAF. With that being said, I do think I have a solid theory for what the greater story is attempting to teach us, so let's jump into this, shall we? I'm not going to beat around the bush and make you wait till halfway through the video. I believe that the deeper meaning behind FNAF is the importance of letting go. Letting go can mean a multitude of different things. It can be acceptance on something that cannot be changed, it can be releasing emotions of negativity, or it can be something more spiritual and tied to someone's attachment towards desires and accepting the flow of life. But let me ask you, what happens when you can't let go? What happens when the past causes you to continually make every future situation you find yourself in worse? In Five Nights at Freddy's, the one thing that is repeatedly brought up again and again is the past. The biggest year in the franchise is that fabled year 1987. It was the very first year ever referenced in the series, and even at the time of the first game's release was far in the past. In the second game, instead of moving into the future, it instead went back to 1987, exploring the relevance and details. And even when we made it to the third game, the setting, atmosphere, and even the villain were all intrinsically tied to past events. The past and its importance would continue to be prevalent in every Five Nights at Freddy's game ever released, even to this day. The reason why I bring this up is because in every piece of FNAF media, the past dictates everything. And there's no better way to see it than with the characters. William Afton is a character so tied to the past that he has almost no impact in the present without context of these events. We of course know him as a monster, the man behind the slaughter, a cruel and vile and cowardly man. But what caused all of these events? Well, an interpretation I talked about in my previous video is Afton starting his killing spree to save his son and then falling into becoming a monster. But another interpretation is him becoming a mad scientist to play God upon the discovery of Remnant and its ability to bind souls to inanimate objects. And of course, another big interpretation is that he's just a maniac, a psychotic, cold-blooded killer. But all 3 of these interpretations still rely on one thing: his past. It's everything in the past we care about. The loss of his son, the loss of his daughter, the missing children's incident, and his spring locking. No matter what angle you view his characterization from, all of his actions in the present are directly influenced by what he did in the past. You could view him as a grieving father trying to bring back his children, or a mad scientist killing to aid his experiments in bringing the dead back to life, or as someone who was always wicked and killed for the fun of it. But no matter how he's viewed, he still killed so many innocent children in the past and continued down his road of evil. That permanently screwed up who he is in the present and destroyed any chance of a future. Either he could not let go of the loss of his children, or he could not stop committing to heinous acts to further his own goals. Either way, he is still almost completely dictated by his past. Then we have Charlie Emily, better known as the animatronic she possesses, the puppet. Charlie, too, is also intrinsically tied to the past in a very different way. She was the very first child Afton ever killed, an innocent bystander who took the brunt of Afton's rage after the loss of his son. After she possessed the puppet, she gave life to the other animatronics who now also each inhabit a soul of a child killed by William Afton. The real question is if this was the right decision. While bringing the animatronics to life did eventually lead to the downfall of Afton, Charlie also stopped at least 5 other children from moving into the afterlife. This could have been a mistake by Charlie in wanting to help them, but the reason doesn't matter as much as the consequences. Even after this, she continued to pursue Afton until the final game in the original series. Her motivation, in a way, was similar to Afton. She let her past dictate her present and future. But instead of committing evil actions, she wanted to stop Afton from doing what was done to her onto others. And that eventually led her to these decisions that, while good, do doom others to a fate they didn't ask for. Her fate. Whether you like it or not, just like Afton, she did what she did to further her own personal goals because of what happened in her past, just like him. And of course, we have to mention the main character, Michael Afton. Michael is the one who started all of this by being a bully to his little brother. In doing so, he made a mistake that he could never take back. He accidentally killed his brother, and this set his father on a road to becoming a monstrous serial killer. Despite us playing almost all of the games through his eyes in his current present, Michael is just as tied to the past as his father. He either actively returns to each Freddy's location to try and free his family because of the goodness of his heart or the weight of his guilt. Guilt for the accident with his brother, guilt for being unable to save Elizabeth from Circus Baby, and guilt for potentially knowing how evil his father was and doing nothing about it. He too is tied to his past and lets it dictate his present and future. What all 3 of these characters share is a sense of being shackled to the past with an inability to let go so they can shape their present. And that's the meaning of Five Nights at Freddy's. FNAF is, at its core, about letting go of the past and the consequences of what happens when you don't. William went on a violent killing spree and became a monster either because he couldn't accept the loss of his son or because he was always twisted, which eventually sealed his own fate. Charlie, instead of finding a way to stop Afton herself or figuring out a way to remove herself from the puppet, doomed other souls to her fate to try and stop her monster. And Michael, instead of moving on from his family, proceeded to go to every new Freddy's location again and again and again to try and free them, but it was all in vain. William couldn't let go of the rush of a kill, Charlie couldn't let go of the anger she felt, and Michael couldn't let go of the overbearing guilt he felt as the person that started this tragic tale. Of course, while this is a flaw they all share, Charlie and Michael are still morally good compared to Afton's evil, but this shared trait shouldn't be overlooked. The books also line up with this concept perfectly. In the books, William Afton was a crazy lunatic obsessed with the concept of living forever through machines. He's been a night guard at the now abandoned Freddy's for years. He's been essentially reliving his glory days, acting like he's one of the animatronics, dancing around in his spring Bonnie suit, quite literally living in the past. There was no evidence to incriminate Afton, yet he, like his game counterpart, continued to return to the old Freddy's Pizzeria, which would eventually lead to his downfall. Meanwhile, Henry, who's supposed to be the good half of the 2 business partners, could never let go of the loss of his daughter, causing him to create robotic versions of her to simulate aging, and eventually he left her with no clear idea of her place in the world. Henry, despite still having a living son, completely ignored him in favor of mourning his daughter and trying to bring her back from the dead through robotic recreations, which is pretty sick and twisted. And of course, it was never a proper replacement for the daughter he lost, and he eventually decided to leave this world with his robotic doll still in it, alone. Now, of course, I'm summarizing these characters and skipping over major facets of their life and personality, but I think the point I'm presenting still stands. Almost every major character in Five Nights at Freddy's is tied to their past. They cannot or will not let go of it, and it only continually makes things worse the more their futures are shaped by their pasts. In FNAF, holding on to your past never ends well. Every action that is aided by the negative attributes of your past will only continue to make things worse in your present and future. No piece of FNAF media better showcases this than the first Five Nights at Freddy's movie. In the movie, the main character Mike Schmidt is haunted by the death of his brother. In the past, his brother Garrett was taken by a mysterious stranger during a hiking trip, which Mike blames himself for. Ever since then, he has been falling asleep every night to try and recreate these events using the concept of dream theory, the theory that our minds soak in more detail than we originally suspect. He replays this memory again and again and again every single night in his dreams to try and find some sort of detail that could help him find out what happened to his brother. This has serious consequences in the present through his relationship with his still alive younger sister, Abby. He's trying to raise her all by himself, and while they are still close, their relationship is strained. It eventually reaches a point where he almost trades Abby's life for the possibility of being with the illusion of his younger brother again. But unlike the characters I've mentioned so far, Mike actually does make a different choice. Instead of being bound to the past and to a mistake that he had no possible way to prevent, he instead focuses on who he still has in his life, Abby. And because of that, he saves his sister from the fate of so many other children in this series. Because he let go of his past and focused on his present, he could build a better future for him and his sister. Then we have Vanessa, a character who is almost completely dictated by her past against her will. She works as a cop because of her father, she holds on to her trauma and is constantly reminded of it because of her father, and she at first kept Mike in the dark about what happened at Freddy's and was told to kill him if he got too close to the truth because of her father. Unlike Mike, who did have the option to let go of his past at any time, Vanessa never even had the choice. She had no option to make her own future decisions. It wasn't until meeting Mike and seeing his relationship with Abby does she finally stand up to her father. It doesn't work out well for her in the moment, but long term, it finally stopped his reign of terror. For now anyway. And then you have Afton in the movie, who is more tied to the past than any of the other characters. He still keeps the Freddy's building up because, quote,
well, he's kind of a sentimental guy, I guess.
He still keeps and wears his spring Bonnie suit despite the deterioration and greater risk of spring lock failure. And even though he could have walked away from his crime scot-free, he just kept going, and it eventually led to his own demise. Mike and Vanessa showcase how letting go of tragic past events can aid the present and the future, while Afton showcases how the past can destroy your present and any chance you have of a future. So between the games, books, and movie, the common through line has always been letting go, specifically the consequences of not letting go. A saying that I heard when I was really young that I still hold on to is, the past is something to learn from, not to repeat. But the variation of this saying you might know better is, those who do not learn from the past are doomed to repeat it. Most of the characters in this series, I would say, do not repeat their past in a traditional sense. They don't make the exact same wrong choices again and again, except for Afton, of course. Instead, all of the negativity of their past is brought forward into their futures. This affects their decisions and the course of their lives. Most of these characters have not learned from the past. They continually make choices that are influenced only by the negative attributes. But there is one character that demonstrates the latter. One character that is built upon the idea of letting things go. And that's the game version of Henry Emily. Henry is a weird character to talk about. While he was very important in the books, the games don't feature him as a proper character until Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator, aka the second to last game of the original story. Though for the purposes of his story, it does make sense why he entered so late, and it's because of what he represents. Game Henry is the perfect example of letting go and why it's so important. I plan to make a whole video between the different Henry incarnations and how the game version is undoubtedly the best one, but he is also meant to represent what the other characters in this series should have done. Henry was, of course, the original co-owner of Fredbear's Family Diner and Freddy Fazbear's Pizza alongside his friend William Afton. As we know, after Afton's son died from his Fredbear bite, William took out his rage and anger on Henry's daughter Charlie. He blamed Henry due to Fredbear being his creation, as he was the animatronic inventor. So William took Henry's most important creation from him. This eventually led to Afton learning about Remnant, causing the rest of the story to happen. Now, Henry is briefly indirectly mentioned in FNAF 2 and possibly FNAF World, but that's really where the small snippets of his story ended for a long time. Like I said, Henry does not appear until Pizzeria Simulator, and that's because Henry didn't want to keep going with the Freddy's brand after his daughter's death. Through the Insanity ending in Pizza Sim, we learn how Henry eventually learned about all of Afton's misdeeds and how he regretted not knowing much sooner, as he could have stopped it.
As if the suffering wasn't enough, the loss of innocence, the loss of everything to so many people. Small souls trapped in prisons of my making, now set to new purpose, and used in ways I never thought imaginable. He lured them all back to a familiar place, back with familiar tricks. He brought them all together. Are they still aware? I hope not. It keeps me awake at night. I could make myself sleep, but not yet. Not until I undo what he has done and heal this wound. A wound first inflicted on me, but then one that I let bleed out to cause all of this.
Now that he knows about these crimes, he built the fake Freddy's Pizzeria to lure back every remaining animatronic and bring them to one location, and then has all of them burned together to release their souls.
I don't know how those tiny breaths of life came to inhabit those machines, but they will never find rest now, not like this. I have to call them all back, all of them, together in one place.
Letting the ones who wish to move on finally be free, and forcing the monster of their misery to finally burn. When you put it through the lens I've been presenting, Henry truly is a perfect example of letting go. Instead of going crazy and attempting to build a robotic version of his daughter like his other version did in the books, Henry moved on. We don't know what he did with his life in that time, but he wasn't present for any of the future tragedies at Freddy's because he was living his life. Once he did figure out what happened at Freddy's and what Afton did to his daughter, instead of trying to track them down himself and getting into wacky antics like Michael, he carefully laid a trap to pull everyone to him. And then he forced everyone to move on and let go while he himself hopefully gets to reunite with his daughter in heaven. Henry not only let go initially and moved on with his life, but then when he saw an opportunity to end the suffering of his daughter and the others, took it and let them all finally move on. He brought both the positive and negative parts of his past to the present to free everyone. He balanced letting go while also balancing the positive and negative. But that's not the ending of the video, because there is one more character that I want to focus on. While Henry showcases the absolute best of how letting go can help your future, there is a character that showcases the absolute worst of not letting go, this being Cassidy, the spirit possessing Golden Freddy. While Henry's plan to end all of Afton's monsters did work, there was one that was left behind. That being Golden Freddy, aka Cassidy. Unfortunately, Cassidy can't be burned due to the suit being ethereal and ghostly, not physical, so she's still stuck here, unable to move on. So, since she couldn't move on, she doesn't let Afton move on either. She traps Afton in a constant cycle of purgatory, reliving a nightmare involving all of his own creations in one massive night every night. This, of course, is the events of Ultimate Custom Night. While Afton is a monster and definitely deserves every single night that Cassidy throws at him in this game, this isn't a healthy outcome for Cassidy, as now her entire existence is just making Afton pay for as long as she possibly can. Like Henry, I do plan on doing a video on Cassidy eventually, so I'll cut off my analysis there. But I think this perfectly showcases what I mean. I would argue that Afton is a better showcase of the consequences involved with not learning from your past, but Cassidy is also a shining example of how not letting go and moving on can affect someone. She was in pain for so long that the idea of stopping what she was doing isn't even a thought to her. Many of the voice lines in Pizza Sim reference this, but the biggest one is when Cassidy is talking through Orville Elephant to Afton. You can hear it here.
He tried to release you. He tried to release us. But I'm not gonna let that happen. I will hold you here. I will keep you here. No matter how many times they burn us.
Eventually though, Afton does move on to his eternal punishment, leaving Cassidy no clear idea of where to go next. I got a lot of comments in my last video saying she probably isn't in Princess Quest, so I'm unsure where she is in the future of the series. UCN also features that secret with Old Man Consequences, which I still theorize to be Henry. If I am correct, it's even more telling that he tells Cassidy to leave the demon to his demons. But the only way to leave this place is to phase yourself into the lake, so Cassidy can keep punishing the man that made her suffer, repeating the cycle once again. Now that we have our examples, let's draw this all together. While I don't think it's the only theme of FNAF, as it is a multifaceted franchise, I believe that the consequences of not letting go of the past and moving on are an important and constant theme. The past is an important tool. It can help us understand the present and make choices to shape our future. If we choose to reflect on our past events, both the positive and the negative, it can help us grow as people. But if we only focus on the negative parts of our past and use that to shape our futures, then all we're doing is reshaping the negative parts of our past into our present. This is what most of the characters in the series tend to do. They follow the negative attributes of their past rather than balance the positive and negative. They cannot let go. The only character who really chooses to let go and balance the negative and positive attributes of his past in the original games is Henry. He lived his life and only when he saw an opportunity, put a plan into motion to end everything. Henry still has his vices, and I will get into that in a later video, but I think he stands out compared to all the other main human characters that are driven by their pasts. So, in conclusion, while the Five Nights at Freddy's series features many themes, I believe the deeper meaning, the through line of the original games, is the consequences of not letting go of your past. Of course, if you don't think so, I'd be happy to hear your thoughts in the comments. Even if I don't reply, I read every single one, and they help me improve my content. Oh, and if you enjoyed this video, a like and subscribe would be super appreciated. I plan to make a lot more FNAF videos soon. I'm just going to need some time to write some scripts. So make sure to stay tuned. I'm gonna head out for now, but I'll see you all later. Bye bye!